Hello there, I'm Blackbright, broadcasting out of the UK. Welcome to my channel. First time you're passing through, you're welcome to subscribe by clicking on the bell, or I think there's some red writing, or you can share, or you can share, like, or dislike. I wanted to talk about white people, because when we talk about white people, it's almost like we talk about them as a separate entity. And sometimes the same way that they walk on eggshells when they talk about black people, the same way black people who are sensitive tread on eggshells when they're talking about white people, because we'll always get, no, that's a generalization. I'm not going to say we always, because that's a victim mentality. But we sometimes find that if we do suffer an injustice, we're made to feel as though we're either exaggerating, we've got a chip on our shoulder, or there is something that we did to bring it on ourselves. Then we're often told, well, I date a black person, I have a black person in my family. And that seems to make that white person feel they're not racist. I think where the problem is, or where the underlying issue is that when people do not understand what being racist or what being anti-racist means, we'll have a lot of people who are racist. But what does it mean about being anti-racist? Being anti-racist means that you're not going to see any black person or minority ethnic treated unjustly. And if you do, you're going to speak up for them, you're going to protect them, and you're not going to prey on their weaknesses. What happens, or what has happened in the past, is that people will see injustice and they will not speak out. A lot of times people will watch the media and take it for granted that what they're reporting is true, and they won't question it. And that is, and unless you are black, you will not pick up on the biases. I was watching Piers Morgan on Good Morning Britain, and he interviewed, he had about 3 black people on the chat on his panel, and he was asking them questions. And at one point, he showed them the video of white people kneeling to black people and saying how sorry they are. And I looked at the female of the group, and her eyes turned downwards. And you might ask, why did her eyes turn downwards? Why didn't she look happy to see these white people kneeling to black people? And I can only think it's because it's not the answer. That is not, kneeling down and saying you're sorry is not the answer. The answer is being proactive and protecting and not lying. When you think George Foreman died based on a lie, apparently the shop owner, his name is Mohammed, Mahmoud Abu Malaya or something. Mahmoud Abu Malaya. He called the police on him because he said that George Floyd had given him a fraudulent or a forged $20 bill. And it wasn't forged, it was a real dollar bill. And what is sad is that so many people tell lies on black people, knowing that any justice that they're going to get is not going to be equitable. If they're going to suffer a trauma that is far, you cannot imagine. When you call the police on a black person, it's not like when you're calling the police on a white person. So white people need to understand that the repercussions of not being sure about a situation, they need to stop and think and wait and make sure that what they're reporting on is factual and not based on emotions, predictions, or stereotypes. And what happens is the same way I keep raising the alarm about Renisha. A lady, she turned up at her house. I know it was late, but she turned up at her house because she'd broken down in the car and knocks on the door. And the lady immediately assumed she was a robber, called the police. The next thing, she was dead. You have to understand that once you call the police, you're sending a death sentence on a black person, especially in America. In England, it's bad, but I'd like to believe that the British police officers are a bit more calculating, in the sense that they're more likely to make sure that what they're doing is correct or be seen to be correct. So, and if they are evil, and if they do have an agenda, they'll turn their body cameras off and they will do whatever they need to do. But I'd like to think that if somebody called and said, this person has given me a $20 bill and it's forged, that a British cop would say, well, can I have a look at the $20 bill? And take it away to be checked. They would arrest him, take it away to be checked, and then go back and report that it's not a forgery, rather than hold him down by the neck and kill him. So when white people have the responsibility of looking after us, because we are being treated unfairly and unjustly. It's through policies, it's through legislation, it's done in so many ways. And if you're not, and we can't expect white people to understand. The same way we do not know what it's like to be white, a white person doesn't know what it's like to be black. And when you're thinking about, you have black friends and your husband is black, or your spouse is black, and therefore, you look after him. You have to ask yourself, what is being done to other black people? You might think, I've got enough problems on my hand. I don't need to take that on. That's none of my business. But when it turns out that people depend on that, the government depends on people being so self-absorbed and selfish and not caring anymore. They've planted it in our minds not to care. They don't want people to care. They want people to worry about themselves. And so they create scenarios where people end up worrying about themselves and therefore haven't got time to worry about things that don't concern them, i.e. black people. Black people doesn't concern me, therefore I'm not getting involved. I think what George Floyd has brought to the forefront is how complacent we've been over the years. And it's kind of shown them the injustice that a lot of black people face over the years. And because the lie that Amy Cooper did round about the same time, it kind of compounded it. It kind of reinforced what we go through. And then I heard the coronavirus report. I should be going through this in a more systematic way, but okay. you know, they've been talking about black people dying disproportionately, and black people have been asking, why is it? Why are we dying disproportionately? And they've been saying, oh, well, it's health conditions and it's because you're poorer than the rest of us. But what about those people? That doesn't apply to everyone. Not every black person has an underlying health condition. I remember being asked about mine, and they're like, oh, so haven't you got high blood pressure? Haven't you got this? Haven't you? No, I don't. I don't have any underlying conditions. Oh, well, your age makes you vulnerable then. Anything to make a black person. So, oh no, I'll put that on stop. Okay. Anything to make a black person feel as though they are less than, more vulnerable. And that is what they kind of put into our psyche. No, I do not have any underlying conditions. And yes, I am black. Don't tell me, oh, but you said you said you had a headache the other day. Was that blood pressure? No, it wasn't blood pressure. So don't you have diabetes? Isn't anybody in your family got diabetes? Does any of your family have heart conditions? If they have heart conditions, you could have a heart condition. No. So they kind of want to kind of feed the narrative that they have about black people dying disproportionately because they have underlying symptoms and they're poor. And when the ironic thing is that the report was produced yesterday, and which was the 2nd of June, it was published yesterday. And the review reveals that the virus poses a greater risk to those who are older, male, and overweight. The risk is also described as disproportionate for those with Asian, Caribbean, and black ethnicities. I don't know why they would make a distinction between Caribbean and black ethnicities. I don't understand that at all. It makes no attempt to explain why the risks to BAMEs, which is the black and minority ethnics group, should be higher. An earlier draft of the review, which was circulated within government last week, contained a section which included responses from 1,000 plus organisations and individuals who supplied evidence to the review. Many of these suggested that discrimination and poorer life chances were playing a part in the increased risk of COVID-19 to those with BAME backgrounds. Typical was the following recommendation from the response by the Muslim Council of Britain, which stated, with high levels of deaths of BAME health workers and extensive research showing evidence and feelings of structural racism and discrimination in the NHS, PHE, which is the Public Health England, should consider exploring this in more detail and looking into specific measures to tackle the culture of discrimination and racism. It may also be of value to issue a clear statement from the NHS that this is not acceptable, committing to introducing change. The review was published with very little, and that part was taken out of the report. The review was published with very little pre-publicity, following claims government were delaying it because of concerns it would stoke racial tension. Now, why would it stoke racial tension if everything is above board? Why did they take out all of the comments that were provided about what was going on in the hospitals and why minorities were disproportionately affected? You have to ask yourself these questions, and these are what raise suspicions. These are what make black people feel as though they are being targeted and treated unfairly because they have an opportunity to be honest and transparent, and they take out of the report relevant information. They could probably say, oh, it's too much to put in, but put it as an appendix. Put it as a link. You don't have to put all their names in the actual report. We live in modern times where we have links and hyperlinks. So why couldn't they have added that to the report? Why take it out? Because their words and what their opinions or comments were had validity and were incriminating. That is the only reason why they would take them out of the report. And that is why when you're reading reports, it's very difficult to know what has been kept in and what has been taken out for what they say will invoke racial tension. Sometimes if it's not that, it's or they don't want people to get the wrong idea. And the sad thing is that just like Carolyn Bryant Donham's memoir that's coming out in 2036, a lot of what is going on with and against Black people is not going to come out into the open until the most of us have passed. Conveniently so. So everything is kept under wraps. So people cannot know what is happening to Black people and why it is happening. All we know is that as Black people, something is happening. We are being targeted for a reason. We do not know what that reason is. There are people out there that feel threatened by Black people. We do not know why that is. They may know something we don't know, but we definitely don't know what that is. Why they want to attack or make Black people be viewed as criminals, be viewed in a negative light. And in 2020, you would think that this would change, but it hasn't changed. And that's the sad thing. The people who are supposed to protect the country and the civilians of that country, they seem to be complicit in doing things that make Black people even more vulnerable than they already are. I mean, when you think about a lot of Black people, especially women, their spouses or their partners have either been taken to jail, they've either been killed, or they're in mental institution. I'm not saying all, but a large majority are single for one reason or another. And then they put a law, and in the coronavirus, in the health protection coronavirus legislation, that single people cannot stay overnight with partners, which means they want single people to be isolated in their homes. Why would they want single people to be isolated in their homes? Because anything can happen to them and nobody would know. That's my only conclusion. I can't think of any other reason why you would want to isolate and segregate single people other than that. And when you think that Black people are disproportionately single, it begs the question, has that got anything to do with why that legislation has been put in place? So when the martial law comes or whatever's going to come, you're going to have a lot of people who are single. The police can beat down their doors. They know who they are. They can tell from the council tax. All these people who only claim for one person and they get that 25%. They know who the single people are. And all they've got to do now is target all those single people, break down their doors, take them off, and that's it. People watching will think, oh, she's, not necessarily they think she's Black. It's already been ingrained in their head that if the police come knocking, that person has done something wrong. So if the police was to surround my house, they're not going to think, oh, she's a nice lady. Why would the police be knocking on her door? Why would the police be going on like that? They're going to think, oh my God, I wonder if she's doing drugs. I wonder what she's up to. I wonder what she's done. And they're going to think that police action is justified. And because because that person is living on their own, who is there to defend them? Who is there to come to the rescue? No one. So that's why these legislations, when they're passed deliberately for a reason. They're not just passed and they're under the guise of, oh, we've got to protect people. I mean, that is the most bizarre legislation I've ever heard. So I've had to come up with some kind of reasoning behind it, and that's the only reason I can possibly think of, knowing how the government works to disadvantage the black community most of the time. And most people, when they see laws, they think, oh, well, it's for everybody, it's not biased, it applies to everyone. That's what people think. But that is not how it works in practice. You can guarantee that it's been very carefully crafted and contrived to disadvantage a certain section of people. That's in my opinion. I can't talk for other people. I can't say, oh, that's what they're doing. I can't say it's calculating in to say that it's a fact. All I can say is that that's the only rationale I can come up with that can justify why these laws that they make disadvantage black people most of the time. What else have I got here? A lot of black people also have to hold on to their pain. Sometimes, when we see certain things, like, I often say I feel a lot for what's going on. And when I see the protests in England and as well as the protests in America, though I'm more scared for the people in England than I am for the people in America, because in America, injustice is out in the open. In England, it's much more covert. So I am genuinely concerned about all those people who, in their hearts, think that they're doing the right thing, standing up for injustice against them because of the police. There is something quite macabre about the whole of it, and I do not feel comfortable. People do say, protesting is the only way to facilitate change, and I do understand. In the long run, it can do that, but we've got different systems now. Protesting in the past, it was more transparent. You didn't have technology. You didn't have all of these machines. You didn't have artificial intelligence. You didn't have all of those things in place, so that protests were just dealing with when there was a protest, it was just the people and those. Oh, this thing, it just. Sorry about this. I've got to switch off the notifications. Yeah, so it's kind of. Oh, I forgot my train of thought. But anyway, what I was trying to say is that when they protested back in the day, it was open. You could actually see that the people were protesting, and you could see what the police are doing, or the people who were trying to keep law and order were doing. In this day and age, that is not how it works. There is a much larger organization that will curb the protest in a way we cannot imagine. And so that is why I feel frightened for the people protesting. And that is why people think, oh, well, why they should protest. And yes, you hear people. I would much prefer black people to be, I much prefer black people to be protesting in America, where we can see it, what's happening, than in the UK. Because the UK, you just cannot feel safe. And like I said, sometimes we feel as though we have to censor our words. And that is where, it's not something that you can put your finger on. It's not like you can actually say this is happening, or you can categorically say they're doing this wrong or they're doing that wrong, because the English language is so clever. But it's about, we can't even say instincts, because instincts is not going to count for anything in a courtroom. It's just that we know as black people the injustice that is being done. and we know how it's being done, but it's difficult to articulate because it is done through legislation, and because the media seems to be complicit in all of this, we're kind of helpless. And I think that is the problem. And so when white people get involved, it's like, it's like a weight. We're not alone. And it is beautiful to see white people getting involved at this time. And we do need people who are academics, white people who are academics and lawyers and people at the top to speak on our behalf. Because we cannot do it alone, because we're constantly beaten down and told that we have a chip on our shoulder. We're told that we're exaggerating. We're told that it's our imagination. So we're told to get a grip, and we're told that not all white people are like that. So we're left feeling subdued. We're left feeling censored ourselves. And, on a certain level, element of what is being said is true. And so you kind of question yourself. Am I overreacting? Am I exaggerating? Do I have a chip on my shoulder? Have I got long-lasting issues from childhood that's making me feel paranoid and skeptical and all of these things? And that's what happens, because as Black people, we do not know what comes from where. We do not know whether what we're feeling now comes from our parents, whether it comes from the system, whether it comes from past hurts and pains and betrayals, or whether it's actual discrimination. A lot of times we can only say it is when it is brought out in the open, like Amy Cooper and all those people I've been listing who have been shot unarmed. And if that was not through racism and racial profiling, that would not happen. So, I don't even know where I'm going with this. I think I've gone on long enough. I just wanted to... George Floyd has brought racism out in the open. The disparities in risk and outcomes of the COVID-19 report produced by Public Health England, June 20, which the headlines of the Health Service Journal read, Government Censored Black and Minority Ethnic COVID Risk Review. And so, like I say, when it's been censored and when things are not transparent, it makes people suspicious, and it makes us feel as though you're hiding something that we already know. We don't have evidence of what we feel. We don't have evidence. We're always told it's our imagination. We are exaggerating, and the evidence is constantly destroyed. From the documents of all of those people who came on the Windrush, when their documents and boarding passes all miraculously disappeared out of the Home Office, which is an organisation that should be accountable. That is information governance. That is personal ID, and they can just say, oh, we've lost all the documentations. We haven't got evidence. We've lost all the boarding passes. How is that possible? And then, like somebody was saying, at least you should have doctors see that they've registered with a doctor way back, and yet they have nothing. These individuals are supposed to construct or get some information out of nowhere, because the evidence that is to support our fears and what people think or what people believe are our imagination is constantly destroyed, constantly taken out, constantly censored. So we end up having no proof, and people just say, oh, that's them going on again. They've always moaning about something. They've always got something to talk about. They're always talking about they're in our country and they tell us that this and they tell us that. They make out like they're the victims. We're the victims, not them. And so you have people who genuinely believe that we are complaining for no reason. We are in their country and we are complaining for no reason. And they do not understand the injustices and what is going on that make us feel that way. We can only feel it because we are it. So, and no one else can. But all I'm asking white people to do is, if you do see an injustice, I mean, you might be afraid to step in yourself, but call the authorities. And like what people are doing now, film it, put it on Facebook, make it known. There will be a point where that will not be allowed. They'll soon stop all of these videos some way or another, people filming injustices, because this means that they have to fork out money. They do not want to fork out money for black people or ethnic minorities. They don't want to do that. So they don't want any evidence. And what is happening now, thank God, is that people are filming. And that is the only way that we can actually have evidence to say, look, this is what we've been trying to tell you all these years. This has been going on, you know. And so thank God for technology in that respect. An earlier draft of the... I've already read that, haven't I? So it would be great if it'd be great if the media could report accurately. I was saying white people cannot understand our struggle. How can they? We cannot blame them for not understanding, but we can blame them for not trying to understand. And instead of looking at this situation as a race thing, look at it as a human to human thing. When you see things happening, don't think, oh, that's a black person. Think that is another human being. Is the behaviour right? And I think that is what happened with George Floyd. All of a sudden, people tuned into their humanness. People all of a sudden became, boy, this is another human being. Yes, they talk about the black. He's black, he's black, he's black. But what George Floyd did was to touch our humanity. That's what he did. His death touched our humanity and made us all think, my God, there's people out there that would do that? I can't believe it. People in positions of power would do that. These are people we trust. These are people who we have, whose lives are in our hands, who have our lives in their hands. And this is what they do with it. So, we cannot, like I said, we cannot do this alone. We know there are good, moral, supporting white people out there who are in a position to make a difference, to highlight disparities and injustices, just like the Health Service Journal and lawyer Emma Harris, who informed Preston Windrush Group about the way the Commonwealth citizens were denied automatic British citizenship based on their country, which I never knew. And the thing is that it was done through legislation that we weren't even informed of. And I think that is the problem. The law changes and we're not informed. And I'm sure that has to be a dereliction of duty, because how can we know what we are, how can we protect ourselves if we do not know when the law changes, especially when the law changes and affects us? If we didn't have people going through the Coronavirus Act every 28 days to see what the changes were, we wouldn't know what these changes were. So we are fortunate we have people that, especially lawyers, who are going through legislation and who are highlighting it. So I strongly suggest that you on YouTube, you do attach yourself and subscribe to lawyers, credible lawyers who are talking about immigration and discrimination and letting us know what is being done and what is not being done. Because we'd never find out this information on our own. So we do need more black lawyers, parliamentarians, police officers who are not Guinness heads to perpetuate change. We do not know what it means to be white the same way white people cannot know what it means to be black. But we all know what it means to be human. We all recognise pain, although many are immune to it because of the film industry. But if we imagine that everyone is a family member that you know and love, so that when you see injustice, it will tug on our heartstrings and it will us to step in or step up. And that's all for now. Bye bye.